Those are the headlines this hour, and we start this bulletin with news from the United States. And the Justice Department is investigating Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey over accusations they obstructed federal immigration enforcement. This follows protests sparked by the killing of Renee Good by an ICE agent. Walz and Frey have both condemned the investigation, calling it politically motivated. The probe examines whether their actions interfered with federal officers doing their jobs. Protests in Minneapolis continue as local leaders accuse ICE of reckless tactics. Meanwhile, President Trump has stated there's no immediate need to invoke the Insurrection Act, despite earlier threats. Trump clarified that while the law remains an option, he sees no reason to deploy it right now. Joining us now is Matthew Vadum. He is an American journalist and author. He joins us live from Washington, D.C. What is the weight behind this federal investigation, Matthew? Of course, both Governor Walz and Mayor Frey were very vocally critical of ICE's actions in Minneapolis, which saw one person killed and another severely injured when they were shot in the leg. The gap between federal and state governments is severely growing, isn't it, with these investigations now imposed on these Minnesota officials?
Gap between the federal government and some state governments, yes, is definitely growing. Places that are have a lot of sanctuary cities that harbor illegal aliens are not happy that that ICE is now there trying to enforce the law and remove people who don't have a legal right to be in the country. So yeah, it is causing some tension, and there's no question about that. When you ramp up an immigration enforcement operation with a view to deporting potentially millions of illegal aliens, some people are going to get upset. So that's to be expected. The question is, where is this investigation of Governor Walz and Mayor Frey of Minneapolis going to go? And it's just an investigation. The Department of Justice opens lots of investigations and then doesn't actually lay charges. So they both have issued a lot of rhetoric encouraging resistance. I'm not sure if that counts as actual, obstruction of ICE operations, but that is what the Department of Justice is going to investigate.
Matthew, some critics are seeing these investigations as threats. Speak out against Trump's actions in your state and have an investigation opened on you. Of course, this follows a wide number of investigations against other federal officials, of course, mainly Democrat officials and former members of his cabinet. And just adversaries in general. Of course, you've got Jacob Frey and Tim Walz, Alicia Sotkin, Chris Christie, Jerome Powell. That was yesterday. You've also got the likes of John Bolton, his former national security advisor. What is Donald Trump's pattern here in opening these investigations in former officials that seemingly are those who disagree with him the most?
Well, they are people who disagree with him a lot, but some of them may have also broken the law, particularly John Bolton, and that's why he's being probed by the Justice Department. That's why he's being investigated and being prosecuted. Some of these people who are being investigated by the Justice Department have actually apparently done something wrong. Now, you look at the case of Walz, the governor of Minnesota, and he has talked about, I don't know if he's done anything overtly, to obstruct ICE, but he has threatened to use the National Guard to combat ICE troops, ICE officers, and that's a pretty unusual thing for a governor to do. And the mayor, Frey of, I guess Jacob, I think is his first name, Frey of Minneapolis,
Mm.
was a lot more explicit. He was caught on video. He was on video at a press conference a couple of days ago with his chief of police, saying saying that ICE should be fought, that forces, that police in his um, jurisdiction should fight ICE in the
He,
streets. And I thought, wow, that is really, really specific, and that's not the sort of thing that you have an American mayor normally threatening to do. And I wonder if that crosses the line. But that's something that the Department of Justice will have to pass judgment on.
uh,
So, you know,
Matthew,
they're not just enemies of Trump. They're
mm.
people who may have actually broken the law, and this is why the Justice of Department is investigating.
But Matthew, of course, ICE conducts itself in a way which is pretty unique. Of course, they wear face coverings. They often travel in unmarked vehicles. Also, over the past week, of course, in Minneapolis, which is where these two individuals are based. Of course, we've seen the killing of Renee Good and the injuring of another protester who was shot in the leg. We are seeing some investigation go into the killing of Renee Good, who was an American citizen, of course. However, not the same vocal backing of a investigation when it comes to that. Of course, we've seen the state authorities have their investigation powers lifted from that case in particular. The actions there, of course, some would see as problematic. What are your thoughts?
You mean the federal government isn't investigating the Renee Good
The
shooting?
the state authorities, the FBI are taking control of that now.
Well, yeah, because it's a federal matter. But I think the state can still conduct its own investigation. I think the feds take it over, in the sense that they command the playing field, for lack of a better term, but I don't think they can forbid state officials from doing their own investigation. And I have no doubt that the state officials are investigating, what was his name? Jonathan Ross, the
Mm-hmm.
ICE officer who shot Renee Good. So nobody can stop them from doing that. But when there's a clash of jurisdictions, federal government, usually wins out. Do they have to share evidence? Do they have to disclose things to each other? I'm not sure exactly how all that works, but you can't stop state and local governments from investigating. If they want to investigate, they will. They have their own prosecutors, their own district attorneys, and
Well,
and what have you.
Minnesota officials have effectively been blocked from participating in the main investigation into the fatal shooting of Renee Good, and federal authorities have restricted their access to evidence and oversight. Of course, this is seeing local and state officials push back due to this action by the national government. Publicly, they have urged the FBI and state investigators and criticized this federal approach for lacking transparency and accountability. Why would the Trump administration completely block the state in which this shooting occurred from investigating it?
Well, they can't block them from investigating. They can deny them access to, the scene of the crime, the scene of the event. They can deny them access to evidence, but they can't forbid them. They can't issue an order saying you can't investigate. They can just make it difficult for them to investigate. There's no, you can't say they can't say you can't do this. They can just make the other side. They can just make the state and local governments' lives more difficult by not cooperating. The federal government, and this is not just a Trump thing. This is long before Trump. When something happens and it's part of federal jurisdiction, federal government often doesn't like sharing doesn't like sharing its territory, doesn't like sharing its turf with other levels of government. So, I'm sure that the state and the local governments, the government in Minnesota, will be allowed access to the evidence at some point, but not while the DOJ is front and the FBI are front and center looking at this.
The FBI has
So,
taken exclusive control of this investigation, pulling
right.
out the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension and refusing to share evidence or investigative
Right.
materials with the state authorities.
Right. They're making it difficult, but they can't, forbid them and say, no, you can't do any investigation. But yeah, they're withholding the vital evidence that they need. But the state
But
and
why?
local governments. Why? Because that's what feds. I don't know for sure. That's what feds normally do. They look when there's a matter involving federal jurisdiction, they tend to monopolize the conversation.
Okay.
And I just that it's been that way as long as I can ever remember. Feds don't like anybody, to use an expression, they don't like anybody muscling in on their turf.
Okay.
I don't think it's unusual for the federal government just under President Trump, to be like this. Although, you can see why President Trump would have an interest in the federal government dominating the investigation.
Okay. Matthew Verdums, do stay with us as we have further updates from the United States. And US President Donald Trump has announced